Poor little Hans was very anxious to go and work in his garden, for his flower had not been watered for 2 days. But he did not like to refuse the miller, as he was such a good friend of him. "Do you think it would be unfriendly of me if I say I was busy?" he inquired in a shy and timid voice. "Well, really," answered the miller, "I do not think it is much to ask of you, considering that I am going to give you my wheelbarrow. But of course, if you refuse, I will go on and do it myself." "Oh, oh, no accounts," cried little Hans, and he jumped out of bed and dressed himself and went up to the barn. He worked there all day long till sunset, and at sunset the miller came to see how he was getting on. "Have you mended the hole in the roof yet, little Hans?" cried the miller in a cheery voice. "It is quite mended," answered little Hans, coming down the ladder. "Ah," said the miller, "there is no work so delightful as the work one does for others." "It is certainly a great privilege to hear you talk," answered little Hans, sitting down and wiping his forehead. "A very great privilege, but I am afraid I shall never have such beautiful ideas as you have." "Oh, they really come to you," said the miller, "but you must take more pains. At present you have only the practice of friendship. Some day you will have the theory also." "Do you really think I shall?" asked little Hans. "I have no doubt of it," answered the miller. "But now that you mended the roof, you had better go home and rest, for I want you to drive my ship to the mountain tomorrow." Poor little Hans was afraid to say anything to this, and early the next morning the miller brought his ship round to the cottage, and Hans started off with them to the mountain. It took him the whole day to get there and back, and when he returned he was so tired that he went off to sleep in his chair, and did not wake up till it was broad daylight. "What a delightful time I shall have in my garden," he said, and he went to work at once. But somehow he was never able to look after his flowers at all, for his friends the miller was always coming round and sending him off on long errands, or getting him to help at the mill. Little Hans was very much distressed at times, and he was afraid his flowers would think he had forgotten them. But he consoled himself by the reflection that the miller was his best friend. Besides, he used to say, "He is going to give me his wheelbarrow, and that is an act of pure generosity." So little Hans worked away for the miller, and the miller said all kinds of beautiful things about friendship, which Hans took down in a notebook and used to read over at night, for he was a very good scholar. Now it happens that one evening little Hans was sitting by his fireside when a loud rap came at the door. It was very wild night, and the wind was blowing and roaring round the house so terribly that at first he thought it was merely the storm. But a second rap came, and then a third, louder than either of the others. "It is some poor traveler," said little Hans to himself, and he ran to the door. There stood the miller with a lantern in one hand and a big stick in the other. "Dear little Hans," cried the miller, "I am in great trouble. My little boy has fallen off a ladder and hurt himself, and I am going for the doctor. But he lives so far away, and it is such a bad night, that it has just occurred to me that it would much better if you went instead of me. You know I am going to give you my wheelbarrow, and so it is only fair that you should do something for me in return." "Certainly," cried little Hans, "I take it quite as a compliment your coming to me, and I will start off at once. But you must lend me your lantern, as the night is so dark that I am afraid I might fall into the ditch." "I am very sorry," answered the miller, "but it is my new lantern, and it would be a great loss to me if anything happens to it. Well, never mind, I will do without it, cried Little Hans, and he took down his great fur coat and his warm scarlet cap and tied a muffler around his throat and started off. What a dreadful storm it was! The night was so black that Little Hans could hardly see, and the wind was so strong that he could scarcely stand. However, he was very courageous, and after he had been walking about 3 hours, he arrived at the doctor's house and knocked at the door. "Who is there?" cried the doctor, putting his head out of his bedroom window. "Little Hans, doctor." "What do you want, Little Hans?" "The miller's son has fallen from from a ladder and has hurt himself, and the miller wants you to come at once." "All right," said the doctor, and he ordered his horse and his big boots and his lantern and came downstairs and rode off in the direction of Miller's house, Little Hans trudging behind him. But the storm grew worse and worse, and the rain fell in torrents, and Little Hans could not see where he was going or keep up with the horse. At last he lost his way and wandered off on the moor, which was a very dangerous place, and it was full of deep holes, and there poor Little Hans was drowned. His body was found the next day by some goth. Goatherd, 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 floating in a great pool of water, and was brought back by them to the cottage. Everybody went to Little Hans' funeral as he was so popular, and the miller was the chief mourner. "As I was his best friend," said the miller, "it is only fair that I should have the best place." So he walked at the head of procession in a long black cloak, and every now and then he wiped his eyes with a black pocket handkerchief. "Little Hans is certainly a great loss to everyone," said the blacksmith when the funeral was over, and they were all seated comfortably in drinking spiced wine and eating sweet cakes. "A great loss to me and any rate," answered the miller. "Why, I had as good as given him my wheelbarrow, and now I really don't know what to do with it. It is very much in my way at home, and it is in such bad repair that I could not get anything for it if I sold it. I will certainly take care not to give away anything again. One always suffers for being generous." "Well," said the water rat, after a long pause. "Well, that is the end," said the linnet. "But what became of the miller?" asked the water rat. "Oh, I really don't know," replied the linnet, "and I am sure that I don't care." "It is quite evident that you have no sympathy in your nature," said the water rat. "I am afraid you don't quite see the moral of the story," remarked the linnet. "The what?" screamed the water rat. "The moral? Do you mean to say the story has a moral?" "Certainly," said the linnet. "Well, really," said the water rat in a very angry manner, "I think you should have told me that before you began. If you had done so, I certainly would not have listened to you. In fact, I should have said psh, like the critic. However, I can say it now." So he shouted out, paused at the top of his voice, gave him whisk with his tail, and went back into his hole. "And how do you like the water rat?" asked the dog, who came paddling up some minutes afterwards. "He has a great many good points, but for my own part I have a modest feeling, and I can never look at a confirmed bachelor." But Bachelor. Without the tears coming into my eyes, I am rather afraid that I have annoyed him, answered the linnet. The fact is that I told him a story with a moral. Ah, that is always a very dangerous thing to do, said the dog, and I quite agree with her.